Hello, welcome in YouTube. Today we're going to be doing a reaction to some Warhammer, the most feared Necron. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that name. The Stormlord explained. This is going to be, I am a Necron fan enjoyer, okay? My Necrons are my favorite faction that's non-human. So this is going to be definitely something I've been wanting to get into and I'm very excited to get into. It's Warhammer, it's going to be a good video. Obviously doing this on Twitch, so, come by, enjoy it, all that, live. Besides that self-plug. Just, let's just get right into it, chat. And then everybody else.
Amongst the huge cast of deadly and eccentric, none of them are perhaps as feared as much as Imotekh the Stormlord himself, Pharaoh of the Imotekh dynasty. And for good reason, too. This guy is an absolutely ruthless conqueror, who doesn't just annihilate all of the lesser life forms within his path, but also all of the smaller Necron dynasties that get in his way as well. Now, most of the other Necron royalty choose to bend a knee immediately, rather than face the Pharaoh's wrath. Now, despite possibly being the most well-known Necron character in all of 40k, his lore is admittedly still pretty mysterious. But today we're gonna fix that, as we're gonna get to the bottom of what the Stormlord is all about. From his ridiculous war gear that is so advanced it seems like magic to us lesser species, his ruthless, uncompromising crusades of Necron dominance, and the horrifyingly bloody way in which he conducts war. But before we get into all that, I'm going to take a minute to tell you about this video's sponsor, Warhammer 40,000 Warforged, a brand new collectible.
Sorry, Wish. I want to get to the video on this guy.
In order to understand Imotekh's story, we need to know a bit more about the dynasty that he rules over. Now, 60 million years ago, in a period the Necrons refer to as the Times of Flesh, it was said that the Imotekh dynasty was the third largest of all of
Of course they call it Times of Flesh, because they were fleshy boys back. You know what? That makes sense. That makes sense.
Necron tier's dynasties.
That makes a lot of sense.
By the one that was ruled over by the Silent King, the Zarkin dynasty. However, a lot changed in the 60 million years while the Necrons slumbered in their stasis crypts. Many dynasties were completely wiped out. Hundreds, if not thousands, of tomb worlds mysteriously going offline, whether it be due to natural calamities, raiding by lesser species, or even sabotage by their rulers' ancient rivals who happened to wake up earlier. As fate would have it, many of the Imotekh's tomb worlds remained mostly intact, and thus, in the current age, they are by far the largest and most powerful of all dynasties. Remarkably, the Imotekh's crown world, Mandragora, had come out of the Great Sleep physically unscathed. It had, however, fallen victim to something potentially far worse, a lack of leadership and unrestrained ambition within its royal court. You see, for as advanced as the Necrons are, they are a proud and egotistical species. Many of the nobles' inherent belief in their own superiority is surpassed only by their relentless ambition. To compound on this, it's not uncommon for Necrons to reawaken with detrimental and irreversible technological and psychological damage, caused by any number of factors that could have occurred during their 60 million years in stasis. Some Necrons are absolutely insane when they wake back up, or are haunted by visions and premonitions of the future and past events that may or may not be real. Some Necrons who were once scholars, teachers, or artists in life may reawaken as bloodthirsty warlords, while conversely, once brilliant and revered strategists emerged from their crypts as sparking and gibbering lunatics. What exactly happened to the Crown World's ruling Pharaoh isn't exactly clear, other than they had perished during the Great Sleep. Now, by the time of Mandragora's reawakening,
where's the Silent King in any of all this? Is he still asleep? Is he still slumbering? It's like, where's the Silent King? I know he was the ruler in the back of the day. He might have been overthrown. I haven't done that much lore into this because, there's so much to cover. But what happened to him? Comments let me know on that.
Its population found themselves without leadership, and thus on the precipice of a power vacuum. The royal court was left to inherit the entirety of the dynasty, and with no direct line of succession, the great rebirth of the mighty dynasty was plagued with petty squabbling and infighting amongst its would-be rulers. At first, the dynasty was admittedly able to put these things aside, as the far more immediate threat of the myriad host of hostile Xeno squatters that had taken up residence on Mandragora itself and in the surrounding sector, and needed to be dealt with. Once those lesser life forms had been eradicated, the nobles were once again made victims of their own ambition. Each felt that it was their divine right to take the crown and control of the dynasty for themselves. Now, this marked a period of civil war that lasted around 10 years, with no one faction able to achieve dominance. The political upheaval continued to get worse and worse as more and more of the Necron nobility was reawakened. Each who crawled out of the stasis crypts found themselves as a new combatant in Mandragora's great political war. It got so out of hand, in fact, that the order was given to completely cease all reanimation protocols of high-ranking Necrons. Despite this edict, one of these would-be
That's crazy. Everybody that was high ranking would wake up and be like, I want to rule everything. 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 That's crazy.
rulers got the brilliant idea to reanimate some of the Imotekh's most ancient heroes personally. If he was able to resurrect some of the most esteemed generals from the times of flesh, have them become indebted to him, and personally back his claims to the throne, then all of the other nobles would certainly fall in line. On paper, it wasn't exactly a bad plan, and it may just have worked out for them. However, this pretender's ambition got way ahead of them, and rather than resurrecting some lesser yet still beloved heroes, the pretender flew too close to the proverbial sun, and instead chose to go right to the top. They would reanimate the greatest Necron general who had ever lived, Imotekh the Stormlord. Who Imotekh was before the time of the Great Reawakening is still something of a mystery. Most records from this time are incredibly fragmentary, to say the least, and what we do know comes primarily from ancient Eldar myths and legends, and a few fragmented memory banks from specific Necron characters, both massively unreliable sources. Many of these Necrons describe the memories of this time as being like a memory of a memory of a memory of a memory, a momentary mental flash of an image that vanishes the instant the individual tries to focus on it.
Some of these designs are kind of funky, though. I'm not gonna lie. Some Necron designs are pretty funky, to say the least. Kind of stupid
the novel,
looking.
The Infinite and the Divine, that can give us a bit more insight into just how ruthless Imotekh actually was in life. There's a scene where Trazyn the Infinite is ruminating.
I think it's a memory of a memory, just a hunch. You know what? You might be right, chat. You might be right.
On what he can remember before he went to sleep. He says his memories of the times of flesh are practically non-existent. He can't even remember what he used to look like. But the memories of the war in heaven, after he had received his body of necrodermis, are a little bit clearer. He remembers, quote, titanic clashes, armies of metal marching with dire purpose into the faltering lines of the reptilian old ones. Imotekh the Stormlord, carving through the piteous ancient ones, like the Necron tier death god they had discovered, was all too real. This isn't a lot to go on, but to be compared to a god of death by somebody like Trazyn the Infinite certainly lends credence to him not only being incredibly physically powerful, but also a monstrously intelligent general if he was able to strike such fear into something as advanced as the
old ones. Yeah, that's definitely true. The fact that the old ones, basically gods of creation, were being slaughtered by this man, it's crazy.
There's another more humorous scene later in the book that sees Trazyn and its ancient rival Orokin the Diviner in front of what is known as the Awakened Council. It's basically a council of representatives from different Necron dynasties that's supposed to rule over all of the dynasties to keep their squabbling and infighting from getting out of control.
I see.
And ultimately avoid, or at least lessen, civil wars by acting as a mediating force in a court of law. Earlier in the novel, Orokin had stolen a priceless relic from Trazyn, who has retaliated by basically putting him on trial. Orokin doesn't recognize the council's authority and feels like they will be biased against him as they do not have a member of the Imotekh dynasty amongst their members. Nonetheless, the council intends to go through with their judgment, of which, if he is found guilty, the punishment will almost certainly either be death or banishment. Orokin slyly asks them what they think will happen when the Stormlord realizes that his chief seer had been killed by an unsanctioned council. All of the representatives freeze at the mention of the Imotekh's Pharaon, and as much as possible for mechanical beings made out of living metal, they appear visibly shaken. Orokin presses further, pointing out that one of them had actually campaigned alongside the Stormlord at 1.60 million years ago. He asks him to inform his fellow council members exactly what happens when Imotekh goes forth into the panoply of war. Gone like the Kuvu, he says. It means for something to be completely and utterly eradicated, or conversely to have disappeared without a trace. The phrase directly references the Kuvu dynasty, that Imotekh and his armies had completely and utterly destroyed. Now, fun fact, despite the horrific and bloody slaughter that served as the origin of the phrase, gone like the Kuvu was a term that eventually became a common Necron tier idiom that their people would say after finishing a meal and leaving nothing left on their plate. The trial is immediately postponed and scheduled to resume in about 10,000.
Imagine the wiping of your people being so influential on the species that it gets turned into like a phrase of common use. Like, oh yeah, the food is gone like the wind. Gone like, I don't know, a species is that's basically what they turned the annihilation of the species into gone like the wind as a common phrase. That's a disrespectful.
1,000 years when the Imotekh representative in question was scheduled to reawaken. Trazyn is absolutely furious about this and demands that a mediator be awoken in
Gone
his
like the
place.
gone
And his
like the
interest-
dodo. That is, yeah, exactly like that. Like imagine, imagine that as a person.
And
Like,
sometimes
it's
hilarious
that's
as
crazy.
Necron courtroom drama is, this is a video about the Stormlord, so we'll cover this scene in a future video. Let's get back on the topic of his reawakening. The pretender who took it upon himself to reawaken the Stormlord surely assumed he would have agreed with his claims and supported his pursuit of the crown. Unfortunately for the delusional royal, this couldn't have been further from the truth. Imotekh was enraged by the disorder that had consumed his dynasty. These petulant children had shamed not only themselves with their narcissistic bickering, but further had failed their dynasty that they had taken sacred vows to uphold the sanctity of. This plague of instability had gone on long enough. The Stormlord rallied his own army of supporters and claimed the throne for himself. The pretender's cancer of egotism finally excised from the crown world. The new Pharaoh would see his people united once again, and from that day forth, ruled with an iron fist. No infighting of any form would be tolerated within his kingdom. Instead, that energy would be redirected out into the stars. The galaxy had once been ruled by the Necrons, and it would be so again. With the Imotekh dynasty's vast resources now under his full control, Imotekh would set forth on a campaign of rapid expansion. Since that day, it is said that Imotekh has never been defeated in battle. He is one of the galaxy's most esteemed and powerful generals. Even when compared to the most heavily augmented minds of the greatest Necron leaders, his strategic genius is just on an entirely different level. To the mortal observer, it would seem as if he has some kind of omnipotent power of divination. He's able to simultaneously conduct wars across dozens of worlds and command hundreds of different armies. It's as if he's somehow able to know where his enemies will appear and exactly what they're going to do before they even know themselves. He's been documented as employing perfectly intricate complex countermaneuvers to outwit his foes, while simultaneously coordinating even more complex battle stratagems in wars on far-off worlds. Some claim that his gifts of insight and masterful strategic planning are the results of some dark pact or ancient and blasphemous techno-sorceries, or even, potentially, just rumors that have gotten completely out of hand. In fairness, the truth of his abilities is somewhat clouded in mystery, but the little bit of insight we do get from the lore says that when he awoke from the Great Sleep, he had a form of statistical and hyperlogical strategic ability. His mind was able to process so much information so quickly that, by comparison, if a mortal mind was able to work on his level for but a minute, it would cause it to burn out almost instantaneously. Blood gushing out of the ears, mouth, nose, the whole shebang. Even further, it's said that he is able to perceive with absolute clarity the quote, fractal web of future probabilities. It's not that he's literally able to see what's going to happen in the future, or one of many potential futures like Orkin or even the Primarch Sanguinius can. Rather, that this dude is
I'll just say that would be kind of broke. And then he just brought up two people that can do it. Like, oh, never mind. That's an ability that some people do have. Oh, it's not that broken then.
so unbelievably intelligent that he's able to perceive in his mind every potential outcome and almost instantaneously come up with the probability of how likely it is to occur based on the probability of each of the infinite interactions, great and small, that could occur in each and every one of them. There's one final thing that makes him such a
So
great
he's a
warlord,
gambler, but a good gambler.
and admittedly, it may not seem like that big of a deal in comparison, but it's unbelievably important in the grand scheme of the cosmic battlefield that is the grimdark future. Imotekh understands mortals. He understands how the lesser species think, their emotions, their culture, traditions, how they react in times of joy and great tragedy. If knowing your enemy is the true mark of a master strategist, then Imotekh embodies this philosophy better than perhaps any other general alive. Now, there is one caveat to this. Imotekh is practically the avatar of logic. This is what all of his systems are rooted in. So the only enemy that he truly struggles with are creatures that behave completely irrationally. Which, fun fact, makes
Oh my god, the orcs. No, you know what? That makes sense. This makes so much sense. Of course, this is gonna be his mortal enemy.
him absolutely despise having to fight the orcs, as being unpredictable is kind of what they're all about. Imotekh understands that when fighting against mortals, fear is potentially the most potent weapon of all, and thus he utilizes terror in his strategies quite frequently. His armies march under the cover of blackened, storm-ridden skies, the clouds billowing forth cascading arrays of emerald lightning that lash against the enemy, tearing apart war engines and infantry alike. Many enemies that find themselves in the position under the storm clouds are simply swallowed up by the torrent. The energy they produce, cutting off all forms of communication with their allies, and making them easy prey for his legions. Any foes that
That's
do
a
manage to
towel.
escape are chased down by his swarms of blood scarabs. Now, these tiny machines embed themselves in the fleeing warriors and produce a signal that proves irresistible to packs of flayed ones. If you're not familiar with them, flayed ones are insane Necrons who have been inflicted with what the dynasties refer to as the Flayer Curse. What exactly the curse is still up for debate, but most tend to believe that it is some form of technological virus, a disease that causes their mind to rapidly deteriorate and makes the afflicted individual constantly crave the taste of flesh and blood. Eventually, they're
So they have fucking zombies. That immortal zombies is crazy. Nah, immortal zombies.
compulsion to start taking grisly trophies from their enemies evolves into a full-blown insanity, fracturing not just their minds, but their physical bodies as well, as the curse also causes the metal frame of their necrodermis to mutate into a hunched, loping feral predator, a form much more reflective of their diseased mind. The great irony is that their living metal bodies don't actually have mouths with which to eat. Unable to ever truly feed, they are driven deeper and deeper into a psychotic madness the longer they continue to exist. Like hungry ghosts, they are drawn to battlefields across the stars with high levels of casualties, attracted to the intoxicating scent of fresh gore, like hungry seaborne predators. The blood scarabs that Imotekh utilizes pulse out a signal that mimics the bloodiest of all battlefields. When received and interpreted by their fractured minds, swarms of flayed ones rip their way across reality and tear into the battlefield in their hundreds if not thousands. Fully engulfed in their own homicidal madness, they hurl themselves into the fray, eviscerating anything and everything in their path. They descend upon the enemy in a cleansing storm of scything talons and flensing blades. Not only are flayed ones incredibly effective shock troops, but the demoralizing effect they have on enemy morale, as the soldiers see their allies butchered by these eldritch abominations, cannot be overstated. Imotekh will not rest until all of the lesser species have been purged from the galaxy. The Necrons were the rulers of the physical universe once long ago, and he will not stop until they take back the entirety of their ancient kingdom. The Stormlord, and thus the larger Imotekh dynasty's aggressive expansion, does not just target the worlds held by lesser species. In fact, all too often, Necron dynasties find themselves in the path of his fleets as well. The strict code of military honor is always observed, and these dynasties are often given the choice to join the Imotekh Empire of their own accord, or to resist and face the entirety of its wrath. Many of these dynasties exist knowing that one day the Stormlord will come for them, and when that time comes, they bend the knee without hesitation. Imotekh, in turn, rewards their subservience handsomely, often supplying them with powerful weapons and other resources.
Ow, my...
But to those who
my
refuse,
stomach just started
they
hurting.
quickly find out that they weren't ever really given a choice at all. Their dynasty would be absorbed into the Imotekh regardless of their actions, albeit in a far more brutal manner. When Imotekh decides to take to the battlefield himself, he is equipped with a wide array of incredibly advanced Necron technology.
Look at that drip, though. I gotta say, his design choice on his armor is absolutely outstanding.
The staff that he wields is known as the Staff of the Destroyer, an ancient and ornamental staff that is similar in construction to a Necron war scythe, a weapon traditionally wielded by Necron nobility or elite bodyguards. It's comprised of similar material to that of a power weapon, and is capable of slicing through infantry and heavy vehicles with ease. The staff had originally been designed for the very first pharaoh of the Imotekh dynasty, Zahet. After his death, it would then be passed down to each subsequent pharaoh, making it not just an incredibly powerful weapon, but also a prestigious symbol of rank. The most interesting thing about this weapon is it has the ability to unleash a searing beam of pan-dimensional energy that absolutely obliterates everything in its path. The only caveat to this is it consumes an incredible amount of energy and must take a significant amount of time to recharge before it can fire another blast. In the Stormlord's offhand, he wields what is known as the Gauntlet of Fire, an armored glove that cackles with green flame and works like an Imperial hand flamer. On the defensive side of his armory, he utilizes what is known as a phase shifter, an incredibly strange device that causes the wielder to appear as a blurry afterimage to their foes, and bullets and blades seemingly pass through them as if they weren't there. This is because the phase shifter has the remarkable ability to manipulate the fabric between dimensions, literally causing the wielder to phase in and out of existence. When utilized properly and with expert timing, the phase shifter can render its wielder nigh invincible. Like all Necrons, Imotekh's body is made of the living metal substance known as necrodermis that is able to repair itself from all but the most grievous of injuries. However, Imotekh is given an extra layer of defense with what is known as the septernal weave, an advanced array of monofilament fibers that are threaded throughout his body. The filaments are made of phase-hardened amaranthite and adamantium, drastically increasing the hardness of his body to the point that it rivals the Astartes Terminator armor. If Imotekh has one major weakness, it was
Astartes Terminator armor. I don't think I've ever heard of that. Wait a minute. Ooh, I might have to do a deep dive on that next.
be a form of militaristic hubris that seems to go in stark contrast to his hyper-logical nature. He has a tendency to let high-ranking generals and individuals of incredible importance live after battling them. He normally mutilates them in some way, slashing out one of their eyes, cutting off an arm, marking them in such a manner that they will never be able to forget the humiliating defeat they suffered at his hands. Famously, he personally cut off the hand of Helbright of the Black Templars in 930 M41 on the world of Schrödinger 7. Despite the fact that Helbright was the superior swordsman, he was never able to land a killing blow on the Stormlord, and was ultimately defeated by him. To this day, Helbright hunts Imotekh with such a feverish zeal that some would say it borders on the line of insane obsession. And it's difficult to determine just how large the Imotekh dynasty truly is. Some lore states that it controls around 80 tomb worlds, with more coming online as the timeline moves forward. Many of these tomb worlds were likely not originally Imotekh tombs, but most likely belonged to some of the assimilated dynasties. Tomb worlds are not the only planets that the Imotekh have conquered, and in the 9th edition Necron Codex, it states that worlds such as these number in their hundreds. Whatever these numbers actually are, they definitely pale in comparison to the magnitude more planets that have been destroyed by the Stormlord's armies. Despite its notable reputation as the largest Necron dynasty, it seems pretty small by comparison to something as large as the Imperium. The fruits of his relentless expansion, however, are still incredibly impressive when you consider the fact that he only awoke from the Great Sleep just over 200 years ago. Despite how important Imotekh's character is to the Necron's lore, it's rather unfortunate and kind of bizarre, if I'm being honest, that to this day we've yet to be gifted with a novel based on this guy from the Black Library. Despite being involved in many of the campaigns throughout Warhammer's history, he also hasn't ever been given a comprehensive and engaging story arc like many other characters that are similar to him. A lot of the stuff we have to work with when trying to piece together his lore is unfortunately still in a fragmentary and semi-mysterious place. And I'm really hopeful that one day we will get an excellent trilogy of books that does the Stormlord
This is a year ago. I wonder if there's any updates on him.
justice. In the meantime, there is a ton of room for speculation about who he was in the times of Flesh, and his interactions with other Necrons by the time of the 42nd millennium. The two most pivotal things to happen with the Necrons in the recent lore has been that of the Pariah Nexus, an event he wasn't even really involved in, and the return of the Silent King, an individual who deserves his own
Why? Okay, that answered my question.
lore video and unquestionably will end up butting heads with Imotekh in the future. We don't know too much about their history, but it is known that Imotekh is not a fan. He blames the Silent King for what happened to his people 60 million years ago, as it was the Silent King who made the deal with the Catan that saw the Necron tier thrown into the furnaces of biotransference. And now, this guy shows back up 60 million years later, suddenly wanting to unify his species and undercut everything that Imotekh has been working towards. I think there's a really cool story arc coming that's gonna see these two characters clashing in the very near future.
Yo, chat. Well, not even just chat, but comments. Either way, who's, because I know they're probably more versed in it, considering who's stronger, right? The Silent King or Imotekh? Or what's his name? That's his name. Or the Stormlord. There you go. The Stormlord. Who's stronger? I need to know right now. I need to know.
But what do you guys think? Is Imotekh the greatest general that has ever existed in Warhammer 40k? Or are there other characters that you think could easily outwit him? What do you think is going to happen when him and the Silent King finally end up in conflict with one another? And just in general, what are your favorite Necron characters or units? Let me know down in the comments section below. The Necrons are my personal favorite faction, and the one that I mainly play in the Warhammer tabletop game, so I'm hoping we get more novels written from their perspective in the future. Because as of right now, other than a bunch of short stories, we just have the Twice Dead King series and the Infinite and the Divine. All three of those books are excellent, but I want more. Thanks again for watching my video.
That's like my consumption with this. Like, most of these videos are great, but I want more. I need more knowledge, more lore. Alright, well, YouTube, that has been my reaction to, you know, the most feared Necron, Imotekh the Stormlord, explained by Warhammer. Obviously, his videos have been great as usual. I very much enjoyed it. That was more of a silent one because, you know, I didn't know anything about this. So I was actually, you know, digesting all that information as we go. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the reaction. I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye, my lost souls.